This kill should not have been feasible. The United States has just accomplished something with its HIMARS launchers that such weapons are not supposed to be capable of, and Iran's fleet has felt the full power of this historic strike. This is a statement to Iran and the rest of the world that the U.S. military is capable of doing something no other military has done before. We've just watched the U.S. demolish Iranian ships with ballistic missiles fired from a launcher designed primarily to kill stationary targets, and this might forever revolutionize how the U.S. wins naval warfare. The War Zone, or TWZ, revealed on March 10th that the U.S. has used high-mobility artillery rocket systems as well as long-range ATACMS missiles against Iran. This alone is not newsworthy. HIMARS is an obvious choice for combating Iran, not least because the government has numerous immobile targets on land that the U.S. can bomb. ATACMS is an excellent solution for hitting those targets, so everything makes sense. But as we previously stated, there is a historic first involved, and it is all due to another sort of missile fired at Iran by HIMARS, the Precision Strike Missile, or PrSM. That brand new missile has made its formal debut against Iran, raising questions about whether the United States has produced an anti-ship variant. Why we will explain when we discuss America's historic strike. First, we need to learn more about the PrSM and why it could be the missile that has allowed the United States to accomplish the seemingly impossible. Lockheed Martin developed the PrSM, which is advertised as the company's next generation of precision strike surface-to-surface missile systems. That should make it clear that this is a short-range ballistic missile that is not intended to be employed against naval assets. The PrSM, which comes two to a pod and can be launched by HIMARS, has a range of 60 to 499 kilometers, 37.2 to 310 miles, and delivers an insensitive munition, or IM, energy payload. That is significant for the simple reason that IM payloads are particularly built for safety, ensuring that no extraneous stimuli other than those given by the missile can cause the payload to detonate. That's the idea, at least. Iran swiftly realized that an IM energetic payload that performs its intended function is sufficient to sink ships. According to the Defense Post, the PrSM allows the U.S. to instantly hit time-sensitive targets using mobile ground launchers like HIMARS, which it already has in the field. We know that the U.S. has a large number of bases around Iran, thus HIMARS systems are almost certainly located there. All the U.S. had to do was deliver its 816-kilogram or nearly 1,800-pound missiles where they needed to go, and Iran would be a target for this new ballistic missile. We've seen plenty of proof that the U.S. has been firing missiles from its HIMARS launchers, which are also being used to launch PrSMs. U.S. Central Command provided some evidence of this by posting a video on X that showed multiple PrSM launches from an unidentified site. Long-range precision strike missiles. PrSMs were employed in combat for the first time during Operation Epic Fury, offering an unequaled deep strike capability, according to CENTCOM. Though it didn't provide much more information beyond displaying a few launches, another X account called Egypt's Intel Observer did. It posted a video of a PrSM launch from a station in Bahrain indicating that the U.S. has been shooting the missile from at least one place. Bahrain happens to be within striking distance of the Iranian mainland. Perhaps more importantly, any missiles fired from the U.S. base in that country would have to travel across the Persian Gulf. What we've just observed indicates that a crossing may not have occurred at all. Rather, from targeting Iran's territory with its new ballistic missile, the U.S. attacked a vessel. That's the impossible feat associated with the world's first use of PrSM, and TWZ describes what happened. The outlet sought to clarify comments made by Dan Kang, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States Air Force, who stated that the U.S. had sunk 50 of Iran's ships in the first 10 days of Operation Epic Fury, using a combination of artillery fighters, bombers, and sea-launched missiles. The mention of artillery should perk some ears here. When TWZ asked what that meant, an unnamed U.S. official responded that the artillery alluded to the employment of HIMARS against Iranian Navy ships. That should not be feasible. That is not what HIMARS is intended for. According to TWZ, this is not what ATACMS launched from HIMARS is intended to achieve. It should also be emphasized that there is no known operational variant of ATACMS that can engage moving targets, therefore it would only be employed against stationary ships, according to the outlet. While it is feasible that the U.S. may attack a stationary ship with ATACMS, its limited range in comparison to PRISM makes this challenging. HIMARS is also not very good at targeting moving targets, as we discovered during the Ukraine war. Dr. Marina Miron, a military expert at King's College London, detailed Ukraine's employment of HIMARS launchers in a BBC interview from 2022. Miron stated that HIMARS is incredibly accurate when employed against fixed targets with exact coordinates, but it is less effective against moving targets like as infantry, therefore it cannot push back in advance. Nonetheless, Kane claims that artillery was employed against Iran's ships, and an official who talked with TWZ confirms that the artillery was HIMARS. The evidence is starting to accumulate. The United States accomplished something unprecedented. It destroyed a warship with a ballistic missile. The following question is simple. How? There is a twist in the PRISM story that may provide the answer, but first let us use Occam's razor and assume that the simplest interpretation is right. The easiest explanation for America's ballistic missile kill is that it employed HIMARS, most likely with the basic version of PRISM, to target a stationary ship while in port. The United States has undoubtedly adopted this method previously. On March 2nd, TWZ reported that the U.S. had attacked one of Iran's biggest naval facilities in the Strait of Hormuz, setting it on fire and destroying at least one of Iran's frigate. A few days ago, the same outlet reported on another U.S. strike against the docked Iranian Alvan-class frigate, which was shown in satellite photographs, burning in Konarak, Iran's southeast and located on the Gulf of Oman. However, there was no confirmation as to what struck these ships, and it is highly plausible that they were hit by U.S. Air Force rather than the artillery mentioned by Kane. The difficulty here boils down to range. Bahrain is the only area where we can observe confirmed HIMARS and PRISM launches. Thus, we can use that as an example. The shortest distance between Bahrain and Iran across the Persian Gulf is around 120 miles, according to TWZ. Both ATACMS and PRISM can traverse that distance, but only a small fraction of Iran will be within their reach. The United States has few alternatives for striking ships in port. The Bandar Kangan and Asaluya ports would be in range, but not much else. Still, if Iran has been stationing warships at certain ports, it is plausible that the U.S. has targeted those vessels with ballistic missiles to remove them from the equation. That's the easiest explanation for the United States' recent world record achievement. But what if there is another? What if the U.S. succeeded to destroy a moving Iranian warship using HIMARS and a PRISM ballistic missile? As bizarre as that seems, there's a high probability this is exactly what happened, and we'll explain why in a moment. Before we get into it, you're viewing The Military Show. If you haven't already subscribed, now is the time to do so to ensure you never miss a video. So we move from the probable to the seemingly impossible. How might the United States strike a moving ship with one of its ballistic missiles? This is the kind of performance that is extremely tough to pull off even when conditions are ideal. Even with conventional PRISM, the U.S. would have a difficult time targeting a moving ship. The clue is in what we just said. Despite their high speeds, ballistic missiles must travel hundreds of miles to reach their objectives. Instant strikes are not possible. So a fast-moving target such as a ship is a very challenging proposition. Throw that target into the seemingly infinite blue of an ocean or sea, and you'll face even more problems. Simply determining where a ship is and where it will be when a missile arrives is a huge issue, and ordinary ballistic missiles aren't always up to the task. At least not the missiles fired by HIMARS launchers. However, the U.S. may not have deployed a conventional missile. The version of the PRISM used to hit one of Iran's vessels could have been a special anti-ship model that the U.S. appears to have been working on for some time. Our evidence for this development dates from 2024. In June of that year, Naval News announced that the United States had conducted its first-ever anti-ship ballistic missile sinking exercise, or SINKEX, using the PRISM. As part of a training exercise known as Valiant Shield, the U.S. utilized one of its autonomous multi-domain launchers and 2 PRISM missiles to hit a decommissioned and moving ship. This exercise marked the first time both of these systems were used outside of the United States, which was remarkable in and of itself, but the fact that PRISM scored a hit is the most important milestone. A SINKEX had never been completed with a ballistic missile before. It now has. As a result, PRISM provides a tool for the U.S. to repeat comparable accomplishments in the waters surrounding Iran nearly 2 years later. TWZ adds that there is evidence that the U.S. has been working on a version of PRISM that has an additional seeker known as Increment 2. There were rumors that this was in the works in January 2024, 6 months before the successful SYNC-X, which used PRISM. The United States had celebrated the completion of the project that enabled the production of PRISM Increment 2 in 2023, according to TWZ, and was in the process of transitioning a successful research project into the application of this new technology. The employment of a PRISM to sink a ship in the summer of 2024 may have been the first instance of the technology's implementation bearing results. In other words, the U.S. uses PRISM in Iran, but not as one may expect. As TWZ notes, this equation contains a large number of unknowns. It's possible that the Army has started fielding Increment 2 PRISMs, albeit on a restricted scale. The Army indicated that it would begin initial flight testing of the new seeker system in 2023. It is also unknown whether Increment 1 missiles can be easily converted into Increment 2 versions, according to the publication, who further speculates that the U.S. may have fired the Increment 1 version of PRISM at a stationary ship. Still, one thing is certain: the U.S. has used HIMARS to kill at least one Iranian ship, which was most likely carried out with a ballistic missile. Whether or not the ship was moving is almost irrelevant, as this is still a global first strike for the U.S., demonstrating to Iran that America has more possibilities for destroying its warships than anyone ever imagined. And it leads us to the reasons why this strike is significant. Beyond the U.S. doing something unprecedented, which we will discuss in greater detail later, this strike signifies that the U.S. is one step closer to eliminating Iran's fleet. That is a key goal for the early stages of Operation Epic Fury, not because Iran's fleet poses a threat to U.S. naval strength in the Persian Gulf region, but because Iran's own piece of leverage is control of the Strait of Hormuz. This tiny waterway in Iran's south transports over 20% of the world's seaborne oil and gas each year. According to The Guardian, this equates to 20 million barrels of oil every day. Additionally, the Strait of Hormuz is the single most important trade route for superchilled tankers transporting liquefied natural gas. Worse, unlike other key waterways, such as the Strait of Malacca, this strait cannot be easily avoided, making it a choke point for a significant portion of the world's oil and gas. Hence, Iran has leverage. However, Iran's leverage can only be maintained if it has a working navy, which the U.S. is currently attempting to take away. Kane claims that the U.S. has already destroyed approximately 50 of Iran's naval assets, including the ship that was undoubtedly damaged by its ballistic missile. However, as the New York Times points out, Iran's regime technically possesses 2 warships, which complicates matters. According to the site, the Islamic Republic of Iran's navy is similar to those of other countries in that it possesses conventional warships. However, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operates a second fleet that uses smaller and quicker boats to patrol waterways such as the Strait of Hormuz, and can be utilized by Iran to launch swift attacks that discourage the strait's use. That is what the United States is attempting to address right now. Every hit on an Iranian ship, regardless of who of the 2 navies it belongs to, is a significant victory in terms of maintaining oil and gas flow through the Strait of Hormuz. Open transportation through the strait has yet to restart. Experts such as David Roche of Quantum Strategies believe the strait will reopen fully by the end of March, but with each successful hit on an Iranian ship, that deadline becomes a bit more realistic. The United States has also assaulted Iranian ships attempting to plant mines in the strait, destroying 16 of them. If those vessels were successful, minesweepers would need to be sent. What we have here is a tug of war in the Strait of Hormuz. The discovery that the United States can now attack ships with ballistic missiles adds to Iran's problems in a naval conflict that it is obviously losing. Let's get back to why the U.S. utilizing a ballistic missile to destroy a ship is so significant on a broader scale. As TWZ points out, the U.S. military has been attempting to catch up in the anti-ship ballistic missile competition for some time. China has made huge efforts in this field, resulting in the development of weapons like the KD-21, an air-launched ballistic missile capable of striking ships. However, potentially is the operative word there. China hasn't fought a major battle in decades, and its modernized military is nearly wholly untested. With its anti-ship ballistic missile strike, the United States has effectively eliminated all hypothesis and supposition. America has demonstrated that it possesses a version of the PRISM that can target ships. Whether docked or at sea, the fact that it occurred in a true combat situation has propelled the United States from playing catch-up to becoming the world leader in this sector simply by virtue of being the only country to have carried out this type of strike. That is a signal not only to Iran, but also, as TWZ says, to any other country that may find itself in confrontation with the United States in the future. PRISM is frequently cited as a particularly crucial new capacity in the context of any potential high-end struggle against China in the Pacific, simply because of its longer range compared to ATACMs, according to the site, adding that the increased reach would be useful for hitting targets on land and sea. All of this indicates that PRISM is not only operational, but it has also undergone its first genuine combat tests, which it has successfully completed. It's almost certain that the U.S. has been firing these new ballistic missiles at targets on the Iranian mainland. However, if TWZ is correct in interpreting Kane's statement that the U.S. has destroyed Iranian naval assets with artillery, PRISM poses a much greater confirmed threat to China and Russia. The U.S. can destroy ships with ballistic missiles, which provides America a capacity that might be tremendously useful not only in Iran, but in any future confrontation. China should be particularly concerned about this new capacity, especially given the country's significant investment in aircraft carriers. The Fujian-class carrier is supposed to signify development, but in actuality, it might be destroyed by a U.S. warship built in the 1970s. Never mind the ballistic missiles the U.S. can now launch at it. If you want to understand more, watch this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe my channel so you don't miss any of our coverage of the Iran conflict. Thank you as always for watching.